I was standing in my parents' hallway when my sister looked straight at me and said, "My credit's bad, so I borrowed yours," like she was discussing the weather. No guilt, no hesitation. Just a clean slice meant to land deep. My father didn't flinch. He just muttered, "It's not a crime if your family like that settled everything." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I walked out of that house with the weight of their silence on my back. That night, I opened my laptop, uploaded the proof, and by morning, her condo wasn't quiet anymore. Before I dive into the story, hit like and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. Let me know if you've ever been in this kind of situation. Your advice reminds me I'm not alone. My name is Kinsley Ward, and if you asked anyone in my family to describe me, they'd probably say I'm the steady one, the dependable daughter, the calm sister, the person who never makes trouble, never raises her voice, never disrupts the image they want to display to the world. It's funny how people confuse stillness with weakness. They don't realize still water can hold a current strong enough to pull an entire ship under. My sister Marissa Ward learned early how to occupy every inch of a room. 3 years older, louder, shinier, she grew up believing attention was her birthright. My parents, Thomas and Diana Ward, fed that belief without hesitation. They clapped when she walked into a room. They excused her tantrums as passion. They forgave her recklessness as ambition. And me, I was the contrast that made her brilliance pop. Our family home in Arlington has always looked warm from the outside brick walls, trimmed hedges, porch light glowing like a welcome sign. But inside, the air has its own hierarchy. There's a script we all learned by heart. Marissa performs. My parents applaud. I smile politely from the sidelines. 2 weeks before everything unraveled, we had brunch there. The smell of cinnamon rolls drifted from the kitchen sunlight, spilled through the bay window, and the table gleamed with their best dishes. Marissa arrived fashionably late, wrapped in a designer coat she wore like armor. She talked about her latest investment ventures, her new circles, her weekends away. My parents leaned forward, eager, almost breathless. When her eyes finally met mine, she tilted her head and asked if I was still doing that little finance job. I laughed softly the way I always do when someone underestimates what I actually do. My work, no agency names needed, is built on patterns, anomalies, and the ability to see through polished lies. It's the kind of job where details matter, where truth is rarely loud but always present if you know how to look for it. Even then, during that brunch, something felt off. The stories Marissa told didn't align. The lifestyle she flaunted didn't match the income she claimed. I caught myself mentally doing the math, something I can't turn off anymore. Too many purchases, too few explanations. But with family, your brain and your heart don't always speak the same language. So I swallowed the instinct to question it just like I'd swallowed 1,000 small warnings over the years. I drove back to my apartment in Alexandria, wondering why I felt uneasy. My place has always been my refuge, quiet, minimal, everything in its place. A space where I don't have to compete with anyone for air. I brewed tea, sat by the window, and told myself I was imagining things. But the truth has a way of tapping your shoulder when you least expect it. And when the alert flashed across my phone later that week, I understood exactly what that unease had been trying to tell me. The alert hit my phone on a Wednesday afternoon, just as I was finishing a review of suspicious payments at work. It was a credit inquiry, new, unexpected, not tied to anything I'd applied for. Most people would panic. I didn't. Something inside me went still the way it does when pieces finally click into place. I stepped away from my desk into one of the quiet rooms we use when we need to focus. The moment the door closed behind me, I pulled up my full credit report. And there it was, a freshly opened personal loan, roughly $90,000 sitting under my name like it belonged there. My stomach didn't drop, my hands didn't shake. If anything, my breath came smoother. Because this wasn't confusion, it was confirmation. All the things I'd noticed at brunch, the designer coat, the new apartment, hints the spending that didn't align, had been pointing me here. I just hadn't wanted to see it. I called Marissa. She answered on the second ring, her voice sugary, polished, the version she uses when she thinks she's above the conversation. "What's up, Kins?" I kept my tone light. "I got a credit alert. Did you use my information for something by mistake?" There was a beat of silence followed by a laugh so casual it made my jaw tense. "My credit's bad, so I borrowed yours," she said. "Relax, it's not a big deal." I closed my eyes. "Marissa, that's identity theft," she scoffed. "Oh my God, don't be dramatic. I didn't say anything. Silence can be more powerful than shouting." Then I heard footsteps and another voice. My father, Thomas Ward, entered the room on her end. "What's going on?" he asked. "She's freaking out over a loan," Marissa said breezily. I used her name. Her score's better. My father didn't gasp, didn't correct her, didn't even pause. "It's not a crime if you're family," he said, like he was reminding me of table manners. I had to pull the phone away from my ear for a second, not because it hurt, but because it confirmed every fear I'd swallowed for years. In their world, Marissa's convenience outweighed my security. Her wants outweighed my boundaries. Her mistakes were something I was expected to absorb. "Dad," I said quietly, "this is serious." He sighed, annoyed. "Don't start. You know your sister always lands on her feet. Help her out. Help her out." My sister steals my identity. My father excuses it, and I'm expected to carry the consequences. I ended the call without another word. Back at my desk, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead, steady and indifferent. I pulled up the loan documents again. The income listed was inflated. The signature wasn't mine, too looping, too careless. Whoever forged it assumed I'd never fight back. They were wrong, because in that moment, something shifted. Not rage, not panic. Clarity. And clarity has teeth. I spent the next morning doing what I always do when the world tilts. I followed the facts. At my office, the low hum of printers and muted conversations blended into a kind of white noise, steady enough to keep me anchored, while everything inside me tightened into a single point of focus. I logged into the systems I use every day, not to investigate someone else this time, but to look at the pieces of my own life someone had tampered with. The full credit file loaded slowly, line by line, each detail a new bruise. The loan hadn't just been approved, it had already been dispersed. Payments had begun. Bare minimum, right on time. Just enough to avoid attention. Whoever handled it knew exactly how far they could push without setting off alarms. My name, my credit history, my financial stability, all wrapped into a debt I never asked for. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling tiles. For the first time, I let the fear slip through a quick, sharp flicker as I pictured what this meant for my career. In my field, even a hint of financial inconsistency can end everything. You don't get to ask for grace. You don't get to explain. You just lose what you built. And Marissa had put all of it at risk with a smirk. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother, Diana Ward. "Your sister is upset. Don't make this bigger than it is." A second one followed from my father, sorted out quietly. "Family doesn't need drama." Drama. That's what they called it, eh? Not fraud, not risk, not betrayal. Just an inconvenience they wanted swept under the rug. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say to people who refused to see the magnitude of what had been done. Instead, I opened a secure folder and created a new entry. Not a complaint, not a report, just documentation. The same kind of documentation my job requires every day: timestamps, screenshots, evidence preserved exactly as it appeared. I saved the forged signature, the inflated income numbers, the payment timeline. I captured every notification, every discrepancy, every social media post where Marissa bragged about her new place in the city she shouldn't have been able to afford. I wasn't reacting out of anger. I wasn't lashing out. This was muscle memory following procedure, building a chain that couldn't be broken. Hours passed. The office emptied. Lights dimmed one by one, leaving only the glow from my screen and the shadow of my reflection staring back at me, calm, steady, certain. I scrolled through the folder again, row after row of clean, undeniable truth. There was no satisfaction yet, just a quiet steadiness, a direction. I clicked upload. The file transferred in seconds, a small progress bar carrying the weight of the entire next chapter of my life. When it finished, I closed my laptop gently, almost reverently. They wanted me to let it go. Instead, I lit the fuse. The sunrise over Arlington looked softer than usual the next morning, pale gold against the row of townhouses lining Marissa's street, quiet, almost gentle. You wouldn't know that a storm was about to break open on her doorstep. I wasn't there in person. I didn't need to be. The notification from the system arrived on my phone at 7:14 a.m., a timestamp I would remember the rest of my life. Action initiated, field team deployed, simple words, no drama, no flourish, but I could picture it all: the dark jackets, the purposeful steps, the heavy knock that carried authority rather than anger. Justice doesn't shout, it announces itself. At 7:19 a.m., my phone lit up again, entry executed. I exhaled slowly, not relief, not triumph. Something steadier, deeper, the kind of breath you release when the truth finally has a place to land. Later, I would learn the details: how Marissa, still in a silk robe, opened the door with irritation, rather than fear, thinking it was a package or a neighbor. How her expression shifted the moment the badges came into view. How she stepped back, confused, defensive, her confidence peeling away like paint under heat. How the hallways of her condo echoed with the sound of drawers being opened, files collected, devices secured. None of it surprised me. Entitlement doesn't crumble quietly, it fractures loud. By noon, the news had reached my parents. I knew before they called I could feel the anger pulsing through the walls of my apartment, as if disappointment had a frequency only blood relatives could hear. When the phone finally lit up with my father's name, I didn't answer. Let him sit with it. Let him feel what silence tastes like when it's not on my shoulders. Instead, I showered, dressed, and drove to their house hours later. I wasn't summoned, but I knew there would be a reckoning, and I wanted to stand in my own skin when it happened. The ward living room was usually warm lemon polish. Soft lamps framed photos of Marissa at every milestone. Today, it felt smaller, tighter, the air thick enough to slice. My father, Thomas, stood by the mantel, arms crossed, jaw locked. My mother, Diana, sat rigid on the edge of the couch, wringing a tissue until it nearly tore. They didn't greet me. They didn't offer a seat. Classic. "What did you do?" my father demanded. His voice wasn't loud, but it shook with a kind of fear I had never heard from him. Not fear for me. Fear for the perfect narrative of his golden child. "I protected myself," I said, hanging my coat neatly over a chair. "She's your sister," he spat. "And she stole my identity," I replied calmly. "She opened a loan in my name. She forged my signature. She put my career at risk." My mother stood, then voice trembling. "But did it have to be this agents at her home, neighbors watching?" She pressed a hand to her chest. "She said you ruined her life. I met her eyes. She used my credit because hers was destroyed. She bought things she couldn't afford. She lied to you." "She lied to me. And you want to talk about embarrassment?" My father stepped forward, face flushed. "You could have come to us. We could have handled it within the family." I almost laughed. "Handled it. Like the way you handled her telling me to stop being dramatic. Or how you shrugged and said, 'It's not a crime if you're family.'" His mouth opened and then closed, as if the words had finally revealed themselves as foolish. "She didn't mean harm," he murmured. "That doesn't erase the harm she caused." I said. My mother's eyes filled. "She's terrified, Kinsley." "She should be," I answered softly. The room went silent. Not angry silence, truth silence, a kind neither of them knew how to hold. "Where is she now?" I asked finally. Being interviewed, my father said, bitterness heavy in every syllable. "Good," I replied. My mother's voice broke. "How can you say that?" "Because accountability is the only thing that will stop her from doing this again. She didn't steal because she needed it. She stole because she believed she could. Because you taught her there would always be someone else to pay the price." I paused. This time it wasn't going to be me. My father looked away, jaw working, and for the first time in my life, he had no defense. I walked past both of them toward the hallway lined with family photos, Marissa in her prom dress, Marissa at graduation, Marissa holding her first apartment key. Not one photo of me on my own, I realized. Always beside her, always slightly out of frame. When I turned back to my parents, they looked smaller somehow, like the edges of their certainty had crumbled. You both asked me to stay quiet, I said. But silence isn't love. Silence is permission. And I won't give it anymore. I left them standing there, surrounded by the remnants of a story they'd written without me. Outside, the afternoon light was bright, almost too bright, the air crisp with the kind of clarity that follows a storm. As I drove toward the federal building for my meeting with the investigative team, my phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. It was short. Interview completed, evidence consistent, straightforward, neutral, final. A few hours later, a second message arrived with a brief update about the asset review underway at Marissa's condo. It didn't detail what was seized, just that items and records tied to the fraudulent loan were now secured for review. I didn't need specifics. I'd spent years analyzing cases like this. I knew exactly how it unfolded, methodical, meticulous, unyielding. Justice isn't loud. It's consistent. And for the first time, I felt something close to steady relief. Not because Marissa was facing consequences, but because I had finally stepped out of the role they'd kept me in all my life. The quiet one, the accommodating one, the one who absorbs, not anymore. The next chapter wouldn't belong to them. It would belong to me. The days that followed settled into a strange, heavy quiet. Not the suffocating silence I grew up with. This one felt cleaner, like the air after a storm when everything sharp has already been stripped away. The official update arrived midweek. The fraudulent loan was fully traced, the documentation airtight, and the responsibility placed exactly where it belonged. Marissa wasn't dragged through headlines or public humiliation. The process moved the way it should, measured private firm, enough to stop the damage. Enough to protect me. My parents didn't call. Or maybe they did, and I let the phone ring until it stopped. I wasn't avoiding them out of anger. I just needed distant space to breathe without their expectations settling on my shoulders. A few days later, an envelope slid under my apartment door, delivered by a courier. Inside were revised trust papers from the family attorney. My parents had adjusted everything, restructuring responsibilities and financial management to prevent future abuse. For the first time, they acknowledged in writing what they couldn't say aloud: the system they built around Marissa had consequences. At work, my supervisor stopped by my desk, tapping a folder against his hand. He said they were forming a new group focused on emerging financial abuse cases, and he wanted me on it, someone who understood not just the patterns, but the human cost behind them. I didn't give him an answer right away. I just sat there, letting the weight of the offer settle. For once, my life wasn't something happening to me. It was something I was choosing. In the end, what happened to my sister wasn't about revenge. It was about finally stepping out of a role I never chose and protecting the life I built on my own terms. Family shouldn't be a shield for harm, and silence shouldn't be the price of belonging. If you've ever had to draw a line with someone you love, tell me, how did it change you? Share your story below, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next one.